The city of San Francisco, imagine 40 years ago. The date, June 26, 1978. The occasion, the Gay Freedom Day Parade, with lots to celebrate. Harvey Milk had just become a San Francisco supervisor, the first openly gay official in California. For those who lived in the Castro, the future looked bright.
People here are celebrating. They're celebrating their liberation, their freedom to come out of the closet and to be gay people unafraid. They hope and they fear, but they are walking out of the closet and in such great numbers that they are encouraged with themselves to think that they won't be stuffed back in the closets by anybody else.
At the time, the biggest threat, Prop 6, the Briggs Initiative, then on the state ballot. It would ban gays and lesbians from teaching in public schools.
Parents have the ultimate right as to who is going to teach their children.
At one time, parents didn't want blacks to teach. At one time, they didn't want women to teach. You know, the old Bible says women shouldn't be teachers in the Old Testament.
KPIX's Richard Hart hosted the debate.
The Milk-Briggs debate was really ferocious because they were at each other's throats.
You know you're lying. You know you're changing the statements around.
Voters delivered a resounding defeat, but now an invisible new danger was silently spreading within the community. A virus. It would soon strike with lethal force.
What did the spots look like?
In June, a cluster of strange pneumonia cases began to crop up in gay men. Then a rare cancer that left purple lesions on their bodies, persistent rashes, lingering colds, fungal infections, dramatic weight loss.
It was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying.
By the end of the year, the virus had killed 9 people in the city. By 1992, that would jump to 30 a week.
For me, it became about more than a story because these were my friends who were dying.
In the mid-'80s, Hank Plant was working for KPIX News. He was one of the first openly gay television journalists in the country. For Hank, it was at times hard to maintain his objectivity.
I usually kept it together long enough to do a story, to do an interview, to go to somebody's house, an AIDS patient, interview him. Many times I had to go out in the hallway and compose myself, especially going over to a place like San Francisco General where they were doing such heroic work, but there were so many AIDS patients at that time. I often had to go out, get it together, and come back in and finish the job that I was sent there to do.
On the front lines, the dedicated staff at San Francisco General Hospital. On July 25, 1983, the hospital opened the first dedicated AIDS ward in the country.
And with that, it was open. What they will do here will not be simple. They will try to mend the effects of something that is new and devastating and fearful, something that seemed to come out of nowhere. They will do it quietly and openly, but at least now there's a central place where they can at least try.
Yeah, it makes a big difference knowing there's somewhere that can handle the situation and take care of the problems. Just knowing it's there helps.
Patients will feel very much at home here in the sense that they'll feel welcomed, they'll feel supported and cared for.
Within days, it was fully occupied. It was called 5B and is the subject of a new documentary.
We would record their deaths here. Through the end of 1983, 24 patients. And so then in 1984, 117 patients.
The entire staff, from the nurses to the janitors, were volunteers. Fear was widespread.
To go to the AIDS ward and talk to people, to doctors, to patients, to relatives, it was tough to get reporters and photographers to go, quite frankly, because they were afraid.
Good evening. I'm Wendy Takuda. Earlier this summer, Jim Bunn and I hosted a show that dealt with some of your basic questions about AIDS.
KPIX Television decided to go beyond simply covering the story and to start educating the public. The station began broadcasting shows that gave frank information about how the disease was spread and how viewers could protect themselves and their loved ones.
Yeah, it was part of the AIDS Lifeline campaign.
What is a dental dam? We've been through that on the last program. We might as well do it again on this one.
Kind of surprising to me that someone with AIDS doesn't know what a dental dam is, since vaginal fluid could possibly transmit the AIDS virus.
KPIX was in the lead on making known to the public what the challenges were and to destigmatizing what it was.
Now, what about AIDS testing?
AIDS Lifeline was a pioneering public health campaign. The goal, to educate viewers about the disease, to stem its spread and lessen the fear. It also put a human face on the unfolding tragedy.
For the next hour, you will join us in the very first live broadcast from the AIDS ward at San Francisco General Hospital.
And what was your reaction when they said, Jeff, you've tested positive for AIDS?
Well, I asked my doctor to leave the room so I could cry. I was very upset.
KPIX's People Are Talking did a live remote inside the AIDS ward.
We went in and so much information came out of that about just the human side of this thing.
I make short-term goals, and I keep them. I try to keep them. Dying for me is, you know, there's a very fine line, I believe. I think at the very end stage, you just keep going. You know, you don't have a choice. You can't give up. At least I can't.
Okay.
With AIDS Lifeline, KPIX also helped debunk stereotypes as well as mobilize research. It was a critical, life-saving effort, given how it took then-President Ronald Reagan years to even mention the word AIDS in public.
What people have to remember is that Ronald Reagan and his administration were silent about AIDS. Finally, he agreed to give a speech about it years into the epidemic. And I stood in front of Reagan. He was up on stage. I was standing down with the press. And I made a note in my reporter's notebook that night in D.C. that at the moment that he said the word AIDS for the first time, 23,000 Americans had already died.
In San Francisco, Andrea Borba, KPIX 5.